Hello and welcome to Embodying Mystical MAC. I'm MAC. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. Today we have a very special interview episode. We have Brandi Mechele with us and she's gonna tell us what she's all about. So give a warm welcome to Brandi. Hello, Brandi.
Hi, Mac. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited to have you. You're, my second guest. Maybe my third of all time, but definitely my second guest on Embodying Mystical MAC. So we're very excited to have you.
Oh, well, I'm excited to be here. And it's such an honor for you to want to talk about this work with your community.
Yeah, of course. So just to start, let's just get to know you a little bit. Maybe give us a little bit of your background, like where you came from and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and I grew up there and I went to college not far away. And once I graduated, I embarked on a career of sales. And I worked in medical device sales and kind of ended my career really like leading and developing large teams. And then as I was thinking about my family and how I wanted to show up for my family, there came a point in my life where I just decided that I was going to transition out of that. And during that time, I was doing deep work with myself, and that's what brought me to my new career. So my second iteration. So currently I'm a happiness coach. And so that's how I spend my time partnering with people around kind of the fundamentals of happiness and how to raise their happiness set point in order to really live like a life of purpose where they feel more fulfilled.
Wow. Okay, first of all, that's amazing. I love that you call yourself a happiness coach because happiness does definitely feel like a thing that needs to be coached. Like we'll get to it. There's a point that we're going to make here that was part of your talking points, but we're going to get to it. I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about your family? Like, were they a huge part of your inspiration to do your self-work? Like, how did that all fit in?
Yes, I love that question. I've always been obsessed with human potential since I was little. I've been reading books about it. I've been studying, learning different spiritual modalities. I've just really always had a knowing that kind of my purpose in this lifetime was really going to be around like having a sense of fulfillment and ensuring that I could partner with other people on that. I would say that just around the time where I decided to have a child, and then now I have a 6-year-old, I really took a step back and I was just reading and learning more about kind of raising a child. And there was one book in particular, it's called Conscientious Parenting. Mm-hmm. And in the book, she says that whatever you want your child to be, you need to embody that fully and be it yourself. And that was just the biggest aha moment for me. It was a reminder and a little bit of a wake-up call that I'd been studying human potential for a long time, but there were still many aspects of it that I wasn't fully embodying. And it was also a wake-up call that I wasn't going to be able to eat sweets and tell my son to eat well, and I wasn't going to be able to be easily triggered and teach him how to keep calm. And so I started to think about all of the things, and I'd already written, I love this. I'd already written kind of what I was looking for in a nanny, because at this time I was still working, and there were many things in there that I knew I hadn't fully embraced. And so for me, that was definitely a tipping point. And I love when I go back to that first job description for a nanny, I said, more than anything else, we want to raise a happy child. And so it's always been really important to me. And he helped me highlight that.
Oh, I love that. I don't know if you know, but I have a huge background in nannying. I've nannied for 10 years. Oh. And I love that. Obsessed with human potential. I'm going to start to use that. And anyone asks me this really cool girl, Brandi Mechele, she's the one I got it from. But yeah, I've always been obsessed as well. And what's really interesting, I had a similar moment when I don't have children, but very passionate about educating myself to be a better caregiver. And yeah, that moment when you realize, oh God, they don't do what we tell them. They do what we do.
They do what we do.
You know?
They feel your nervous system, and they feel peace, and they have such a knowing, especially in those earliest years, right? Like they can't speak to communicate, so they feel so deeply. And so, yeah, they say that everyone has a time in their life that causes them to be like steadfastly focused on kind of their own development. And for me, that was definitely mine.
I'm really grateful. Before I go on, I just want to say that parents like you make me really excited to live in this world and just make me so happy, because I'm just such a champion for the little kids and the little babies. So thank you for spreading your energy. And I know that you spread this just embodiment of this rhetoric wherever you go. And I'm sure it has tremendous effects, not just for your children or your child, but for other people's children. So
yeah, for sure.
That's amazing.
Thanks
you
for
so
saying
much.
that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so what attracted you to come on Embodying Mystical, Mac? I noticed you did like your first YouTube video recently. I checked out that you had something on your channel. I checked out your social. It looks like you're getting your little, I don't know, like your theme together. It's like, yes. I get it. It's like, I try to be very, I don't know, intuitive how I do my stuff, but it's also hard as an artist and as a visual person to be like, looking at those things. So I see you're getting that together. What attracted you to come on here?
I think that you said it. Like, I always follow my intuition, and right, like I was reading kind of about you and what you are committed to, and I just was like, oh, I'm aligned with that, and I would love to, speak with our guests. And I love that it was like, I looked at some of your podcasts, and they're varied in nature, and I kind of really loved that. I was like, this is because that's just how the world is, right? And I think, we sometimes want to put ourselves in boxes, and I love that you're just like living life out loud, and I wanted to be a part of that. But ultimately, I try to always follow my intuition. In fact, today I didn't follow it, and I ended up being late for this call, and I was like, oh, you had a knowing that you should have done this one thing differently, and I didn't do it. But it's always a good reminder when you don't. And you were so gracious in that, but you get these reminders from the universe that you have to follow kind of your gut, follow your knowing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that compliment. It's been a struggle my whole YouTube career to be like, dang it, I just can't niche myself. It's just not a thing that I can do,
Don't do it.
Thank you. I love that. And awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you. Let's just like get into what you're all about.
Okay.
You're a happiness coach, right?
Yeah.
So your main point is prioritizing happiness as a goal versus an outcome. That's something that you're all about. So tell us a little bit about that, because I definitely feel that a lot of people have a very rigid connotation for happiness, and it feels like this is more expansive. So let's just get into that.
Yeah, I think that, right, like happiness is a journey, and all of us have some things in our lives that we are happy about, and some things that we may want to kind of evolve and grow. And so what I partner with people around is this idea that everything you're seeking in life is because you fundamentally think it will make you happier, right? Like every single thing. The challenge with that is that you're always, again, seeking happiness. Right. And so if happiness is here and you're here because you're like, until I get to this thing, I won't be happy, then getting whatever that thing is, right, is going to be challenging. Right. However, if we change that paradigm and we really focus on healing and clearing and aligning with happiness, then all that you're seeking, you'll be on that same frequency. You'll be at that same wavelength, and it will come to you much more easily. And so I tell people all the time, you have to know that if you're trying to achieve something that you believe will make you happy, but the path there is like, oh, I'm worried, am I going to make it? I'm scared that someone, won't like the way that I'm doing it. I'm angry when I don't get what I want. I'm anxious, right? Like, so all of those dense emotions are just making that path really challenging. And so we can have this beautiful alignment and start to see amazing synchronicities in our lives when we raise our happiness set point. And we're not ignoring the fact that all humans have all of these emotions, and we should have all of these emotions. We should experience them. However, what I think people don't realize is that oftentimes humans are spending most of their time with those really dense emotions. And I tell people that the thing that you achieve doesn't actually make you happy. It gives you this moment of excitement. And then you want it again. It's almost like a drug that then you're like, what's the next thing? And people don't even sit with their success in whatever way success is showing up in their lives, because now they're like on to the next goal. And they believe that it's going to give them something. And because we don't even pause, we don't even realize like, oh, I'm not getting the very thing that I thought it would give me.
Yeah, I love that, because I agree with you. It's a dopamine hit. That's all it is, right? I mean, I have ADHD. I'm very familiar with getting my dopamine hit so that my executive function can be in check, and I love how you said it's not about not feeling the rough emotions. It's about recognizing success where it's showing up, right? Like that's what you said.
Yeah.
And that's something my therapist has really helped me figure out, to like be like, hey, when you do something right that you didn't do right for such a long time, don't just be like, okay, I got this now. Like have a party.
Have a party. Celebrate yourself. We don't celebrate ourselves enough. And our life is guided by emotions. And so the more we can feel those high vibration emotions, the more we can align with what we're seeking. And the more we step back and think these dense emotions show up to tell us that something is out of alignment. They're just lessons. Like we're not supposed to be with them constantly, but society has convinced us that we're supposed to live with it. It's just like pain in your body. Pain in your body shows up to say, hey, something isn't right. And then we do the work to release that pain in our body. And it's the same thing with worry and anxiousness. These things are showing up to say, hey, there's work you could be doing. There's something going on in our brain that isn't allowing us to be happy. And when you do that work, you will get to this really beautiful place where now you change kind of that axis, where your normal is being in this state of happiness, and that you just get these other pings of worry and anxiousness and fear when you're meant to, as a lesson instead of living in that space.
Yeah, as someone who's struck, like I have a mood disorder, and I've never medicated it, and I don't want to at this point unless I absolutely have to for my own safety, and all that. And it's very interesting because there is that fine line of feeling your feelings and trying to call them back all the time. And I think society kind of makes us do this in two ways. You either have the person who doesn't fully know what it is to be empowered, so they're consistently in those powerless feelings. That's a lot of times, like women struggle with this, right? Because women anger is often not okay. So then we get stuck in sadness and we can't move out of it towards anger and then past anger. So we kind of like get stuck before anger, and we need that anger to be like, grr, And then you have the people who just straight up avoid. And in avoiding those feelings, you live with them, just like you said. They just sit on you forever. And so I definitely feel like it's so interesting. Just going to share with my journey, I just experienced something that I definitely had to celebrate myself over. It was the first time in my life that I was okay with being in my depressive state. And when I say like being in my depressive state, like I feel like people get very like, and I'm like, no, it's my depressive state. It's not an absolute, it's not this abstract thing. It's something I've lived with my whole life, except for the first time ever, I was able to be like, I can still be myself here. As opposed to be like, girl, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't like this, And so I love that distinction of like, are you feeling? And it's funny because even when I say like, oh yeah, I've been depressed lately, people think that means I've been wallowing all the time. And it's like, no, I still laugh. Mm-hmm. I still watch fun movies. Mm-hmm. It just happens that like, I feel my sadness deeper. And then I probably like write a song about it, or I talk about it on my channel or something, or with a friend, and it passes. Yes. And then the depressive state itself passes, because that's how my chemistry works. But if I were to, subscribe to whatever society's telling me to do, like hang on to that or avoid it altogether, I never live as me.
Right. Because the very thing that you suppress, or the very thing that you try to avoid is going to stay with you, as you mentioned. And so when we are in this really beautiful place of like naming it, then we can move through it, right? But when we're in this place of like, oh, that, nothing to see here, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Well, yes, like it's right there, right? And so I think we can get to this place of saying, to your point, like when I acknowledge it, I can move through it, right? And when I acknowledge it, then I can start on this journey of understanding why it's showing up in our lives and what is it trying to help us to learn. And I love that you kind of release it back out through, talking, through making music, because those are really creative ways of kind of like letting it go and allowing yourself to move through. And I always tell people, like, anything that you release out into the universe verbally through journaling or things like that, it helps you to really kind of get to the next place. And you're right, like the emotions are stair steps, right? And if you try to stay in this, right, like if you stay in shame, like you don't realize like, oh, fear and anger are actually better than shame. Like I need to like be angry to get to the next step. But you're just like, I'm going to hold on to this shame that I have, and I won't like move up in my consciousness because I like think that would be worse, right?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's lovely foundation for your business. If I ever meet someone who's looking for that kind, I will know exactly who to send them to. That's brilliant. So next, that's also part of your whole thing, right? How female entrepreneurs can align with financial success. Now, this is one of the things, I'm going to be real, is like one of the first things that I was like, I think I need to talk to this girl. Just because in light of just, that's been on my journey for a long time, just like aligning, not just so much like I've gotten out of this, like how can I make money in the physical world, and more just like have tried to align myself with this idea of like, how can I feel whole? How can I feel abundant? How can I not over exert myself? Exert myself just the right amount to what I'm receiving, right? And so I'm very curious about this aspect of everything that you're doing because it's very close to my heart. So
I love it.
Let us know.
Yeah, I think what I teach people is that first of all, you have to live in that energy of financial abundance in advance of it coming to you, right? So I mentioned this earlier, but I will come back to this often, right? Like if you're worried and fearful that your business won't be successful, then you're just like really lengthening that timeline between you and success, because you're trying to like push a boulder up a mountain to get to where you're going, right? But if you can really sit in this beautiful knowing, like my knowing, I always say, is my success is inevitable, right? And when you start to believe that in your soul, then you can really have this beautiful kind of financial outcome. I also love to note that, and this you're already doing, but for some people, I think there's this belief that like money is just going to show up, right? And I love those stories. I love when people say like, oh, I did this one thing and there was a check in the mail, and that's really, really beautiful. But it's a little bit like a flash in the pan, right? Like that's not a sustainable way to align with financial abundance. Like everything you're seeking in the world takes action, right? And so you have to have this really beautiful, consistent action to align with what you're seeking. And you have to stay at that vibrational alignment of knowing that you are going to have success financially, right? And so I tell people first, just take a step back and say, is this absolutely the gift that I'm meant to give the world? And if that is the gift you're meant to give the world, then there has to be a financial exchange for that. You have to have financial success, because the universe isn't asking us to be paupers, to be like without resources. But we separate ourselves from that because we spend all of this time kind of worrying and concerned and really believing that we won't be able to make money from it, right? And so this is the example I always give, why we see, and sometimes people get really upset with this, but like why we see billionaires, like year over year, just making more and more and more money, is because they have no limit to possibility in the financial realm, right? And they may have other things going on, right? But when it comes to money, when it comes to that as a resource, as an exchange, their brains are like, this is possible, right? And so when you think something is possible and that there is no limit to it, then we see. And so that's why I believe that society is really bifurcated, right? Like we have some people that just have so much money and they like don't know any other way. And then we have some people who really can't figure it out. And it's probably because they've had a long line of challenges, right? And so I tell Charlie, my son, all the time, the better it gets, the better it gets. Unfortunately, the worse it gets, the worse it gets, right? And so that's where we can do this work to figure out what really is the block. What beliefs do you have about money? How did you come to those beliefs? How do you look at other people with money, right? Like, do you think that money is bad, or do you separate out, like if you see someone who's a bad actor who has lots of money, do you say money made them bad? Because your brain is never going to allow you to be something that you don't believe is good, right? So that belief in and of itself, right? Or people like, more money, more problems. And I'm like, no, that is not true. Like, your problems didn't come from your money. You already had problems, and that has nothing to do with money. And so I think we have to just examine how we think about money, how we feel about money, our ability to align in advance. And all of those things help us to get where we're going. I always note the challenge with money, unlike some things, right? Like I think of the world as having 3 pillars. So the first pillar is relationships, both romantic and platonic. Like, how are your relationships in the world? The second pillar is kind of health and wellness. So it can be like your weight or what you look like, or it can also be like real health issues, both mental health and kind of, physical health. And then the third is success, career, kind of financial abundance. And so we have a set point and a consciousness around each of those things. And so we have to start to think, like, what do I believe is possible? And the thing about money is that you're going to learn about money from your family. You're going to have beliefs about money from, like, if you're a woman, like, how much money do women get to make? What jobs do women get to do? And then you're going to have, like, for me, I'm a person of color. Like, do Black people get to be billionaires? Do Black people get to be millionaires? Like, what neighborhoods do they get to live in? What jobs do they have? Right. And then you're going to have kind of, we're lucky we live in the United States. So we have kind of a consciousness around money that, like, you can pull yourself up from the bootstraps, and like everyone has an opportunity, which some countries don't have. And then you're going to have just like your neighborhood, right? Like, I live in a really cool neighborhood in San Francisco. So here it's like really easy. Like, people believe that, they're able to, access money because of their, intellectual potential, whatever. So they have this deep belief that, like, money is going to be easy to align with. And so that consciousness, in whatever area you are unknowingly absorbing that constantly. And so you have to be able to step back and say, what beliefs do I have about people like me and their ability to be really wealthy? And oftentimes female entrepreneurs may think like, oh, this path has to be hard. Oh, no one's going to help me, And so all of these things that you're thinking and saying are actually precluding you from aligning with the very thing that you're seeking.
Yeah. I love that you bring all that up, because that really is, like, going back to what you said earlier, there's this saying, what we resist persists.
Yeah.
Right. And if you have resistant beliefs around money, you're going to resist money physically. It's just, right? Sure. It's kind of like when you have, I don't know, mommy issues or daddy issues or just whatever trauma, and you consistently don't look at it, and you consistently attract the same issues that you had with your parents. Exactly. But in a relationship, but in a romantic setting, right? And so I love that you're talking about that. I also love that you bring up, like, do you think money's bad? Do you think money makes people bad? Because that's something I see a lot, where people are like, well, I want to make a lot of money, but I wouldn't be a billionaire like that. And it's like, you just contradicted yourself, ma'am. Yeah. like,
but people don't even realize that.
They don't.
Right?
It's cognitive dissonance, right? It's not. And I'm with you. Like, I really do believe that the reason that there's such a disparity is because the belief that money is energy and is attainable has been siphoned away from most of us, right? And I'm a person of color, but I'm very white passing. So I don't have that struggle, but I do have the struggle of, like, for a long time, like, I'm very spiritually in tune and things. And there's still a belief I'm, like, digging out of my brain that I shouldn't be paid for tarot readings.
Yes.
Like, or spiritual work, period. It's like one of those things that, like, I don't offer it out because there's still something in my mind that's like, well, you shouldn't have to, like, if you offer it, then you're gonna have to tell people your rate.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so interesting because even in the realm of, like, YouTube and content creation, it's so much easier for me to, like, fathom that I have value there because it's something I've, like, done my whole life, even though I've been totally spiritual and into this shit my whole life, you know. But you're right, it's like you really have to assess those before you're able to attract the tangible money, because money is just energy. And so you have to align yourself with the energy, right? I've started to tell myself, like, money loves me. We're buds.
Money does love you.
You know, I circulate it, I attract it, we're buds. Like, and that was something that took a lot of resistance for a long time. But then when I finally got around to it, I was like, okay, cool. You know?
And I think the one thing that I will note, right? Because sometimes I think people say that, but I would have a lot of grace with yourself, regardless of how the world may perceive you. I think that, like, you still have those cultural consciousness, right? Like, it doesn't matter if, like, I look at you and I think, like, oh, well, she's probably white. That's irrelevant. You know what I mean?
Right.
What matters is, like, oh, I grew up in this culture, in this community with these people who we all have them. It just depends on what they have. They have a perspective about money and what money should be. And I agree. I think also in this spiritual work, people oftentimes believe that it should be free. You know, like, I would have a lot of clients and they would say, oh, I wasn't expecting it to cost that much. And it's like, well, you're asking me to change your life and you can't change your life for free, right? And so it's like, what value are people putting on it? And I even had a girlfriend one day who, like, worked for a massive corporation, like one of the largest corporations in the country. And she was, like, talking about, like, I won't name the company, but, like, a spiritual company that was growing and evolving. And she's like, it just seems like they're trying to make money. I'm like, well, everyone's making money.
We have to. Like, I hate to break it to you.
Yeah, like, large corporation, it's fine for them to grow and expand and offer all these things. But for a health and wellness company, you, like, have a perspective on if they should or shouldn't make money, right?
Meanwhile, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. Meanwhile,
I was gonna say, working with people's psyches, or, you know, if you're of the belief that the metaphysical is attainable by us, like, I know when I do a tarot reading, it's draining. Like, it's not something that I'm like, you know, oh my God, I'm so dead. But it's like, woof, that took something, you know, and for that to not have a reciprocal energetic response is just not right.
Yeah. Now, I think this is the most important work in the world, and I stand by that. And, like, the work that we're doing, there is this deep sense that, and deep knowing that we are impacting humanity in this really beautiful way. And everything deserves to have kind of this reciprocity. It doesn't mean that, you know, if someone comes to you, like, I had someone come to me and she found me on the internet and she was like, I can pay you this much per month. And it was, like, literally going to end up being 3 years for her to pay me, but that's so fine. Right? Like, you know, there's still that exchange, and I can show up for her and do that work because, you know, she really was committed to finding a path. Right. And so, there's different ways, but my advice to you is charge everyone for your tarot reading.
Thank you.
Starting right now.
I've totally started to do that. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Raise your price by 20%.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's go. I love this. Yes. Okay. So next in your line of work that you do with people. So something that you like to focus on is fulfillment, right? You can have we see it in famous people all the time, right? Yeah. Where unfortunately they have all the substance abuse and all these kinds of things that it's clear that a happy, mentally okay person, emotionally okay person probably wouldn't be struggling with those things, but they have all the money, all the cars, all the opportunities to make more money, buy more, whatever.
Right.
So how do you deal with fulfillment with your clients? How do you help them figure that out?
Yeah, I think that's beautifully stated. And I go back to those 3 pillars, right? So if you're not raising your overall happiness set point, right? Like if your happiness set point is here and you decide to basically use all your available energy in your body, right? Because energy can't be created or destroyed. So we all have, like, if you've had trauma and you don't clear it, then you have bound up energy in your body. If you've had, essentially, trauma is basically what it is. And so every time we have trauma or we have something that we don't actually work on and release and like reset our nervous system, then we have less available energy. And so if you decide at that point that you're going to put all your energy into financial abundance, then those other 2 legs of the stool have to decrease, which is why I think it's so important to just heal and raise your overall happiness set point so that all 3 legs can be in this really beautiful place. And so I love that you said that, because I've seen lately, and may they rest in peace, like, people will commit suicide and then everyone gets online and they're like, they were so happy. And I'm like, but they weren't. Like I don't know. I don't even understand why we say, and like, you can't be happy. They present it as happy. They wanted people to believe that they were happy, but they were really crying out for help in some way, shape, or form, right? And so I was a human who achieved everything. And I think that's what helped me get to this place. Like, my life today is better than I could have ever imagined as a little girl growing up in Detroit. I have an amazing husband, an amazing son. I live in one of the best neighborhoods. I went to the best schools. I tried out for the Olympics. I was responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars and managed hundreds of people at a very young age. All things that I always wanted, but never really thought that I would align with. And I got there and I was like, wow, this isn't the answer. Mostly because I didn't even know what the question was, right? Like, I was just searching for things. I was raised like many people in America specifically to believe that like all of those things would make me happy, would be the answer. And so what I tell people, and it's hard, right? Like, so I oftentimes work with people similar to me, because if you're working with someone who doesn't have a lot of money and you try to tell them like, I promise money isn't the answer, they're like, yeah, girl, let me find out for myself.
Right.
They're like, well, I hear you, but I'd like to actually know on my own that money isn't the answer. And so you get people who also have achieved all these things and they don't have this sense of fulfillment. They don't have this sense of purpose, because we haven't actually like gone back to kind of these core injuries and trauma and things that have happened in our lives and like changed our beliefs. So the work that I do is really this subconscious capacity building, right? Like, how do we kind of heal our mind, our body, and our soul so that we can be in this really beautiful place of having everything you want and also feeling like you have everything you want, which are very different.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like society kind of sets us up for failure, because like, in my opinion, the starving artist is the epitome of someone who prioritized their purpose over their financial success. Mm-hmm. And then you have the overachiever CEO who prioritized their financial success over their, not saying that some CEOs that are overachievers aren't in their purpose. I'm just using stereotypes here. You have like the financially successful CEO, probably like a lot like you were, who like prioritized a lot of financial success and unfortunately found it that like maybe, but what's my purpose though? And it's really interesting because it seems like you're trying to marry these 2 goals. And I get with your clients, you're probably working backwards a little bit because, trauma and having to like go back. But so while you're doing that, that's something that you champion living a life of purpose and self-worth and self-love. So I'm guessing that all feeds into what you were just talking about. So let us know a little bit how that feeds into what you were talking about.
Well, from the perspective, I think that I champion those things because whatever we're seeking, right? Like if we're unhappy, if we aren't kind of showing up as our best self, if we aren't charging clients, like all of those things I say are a worthy issue. So it's always challenging, a worth issue, excuse me. Do I believe that I am worthy of doing this? Do I believe that I am worthy of showing up really big in the world, of having people see me? Am I worthy of, having this exchange, financial exchange? So my favorite thing that I say to people is, show me your life and I'll show you what you think you're worthy of having. Right. And so everything is a worth issue. And I oftentimes get clients and they'll say, well, it's not that I don't think I'm worthy of it. And I'm like, but it is. Because if you think you're worthy of it and you're doing the work to have it, then you'd have it. Like they always go just in line, or at least you'd see a path to aligning with it. Right. And so what I do is really like help people have such beautiful awareness of what's separating them, because until you can understand like, oh, these beliefs, these things that I'm saying, these things that I'm doing are actually causing my life to be this way, because our brains are so incredibly powerful. It's the most powerful thing that you have. And until you change your mind, you can't change your life, right? And so I think, so that's the work that I try to do. And then I agree with you in terms of like society has these things and we call them stereotypes, but people, they're so ingrained in what people believe, right? So if you believe that you have to be a starving artist, then you'll be a starving artist. If you believe that like CEOs make goo gobs of money, then you'll have like that path, right? And so you have to start by just saying, I can do the work that I love, whatever that work is, and I can have alignment financially of whatever I'm seeking, right? Like there's some coaches who make, $50, every time, for a month. And there's some coaches who make $50,000. And, there's this woman who runs a coaching school who is going to make $100 million this year, right? And I would argue, like perhaps obviously the lady who makes $100 million, she's been doing it a very long time. She's probably pretty good at it, but there's really no difference between humans. Like we all have this beautiful potential to show up in the world, and the work is figuring out where those blocks are.
Yes, I love that you focus on that. Something that I want to add to that maybe you can even bring to your clients to help some perspective is, I think people forget how complex our psyches are. And just because the one part of you that's kind of more always consciously aware of itself doesn't think it has a worth issue, you might have an inner child that does. Or an inner teenager that does, or an inner young adult that maybe had a really rough experience, you know? Because there are some people who like, I have one of my best friends, her mom, literally like top tier parenting in a way that I'm just like, you had no guidance to be better and you just were. Like, this is crazy. This is awesome. She still has issues because she lived in a society that has issues, And just because... And it's interesting because you look at someone like, well, she had a secure attachment, blah, 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 all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, but then you go through the world and there are parts of you that stay there. And the thing about trauma, right? It freezes whatever parts of you were in that moment. And if you don't deal with it, right? That's like why that's why I don't tell, like if kids that I'm taking care of are crying, the first thing I do is like, okay, you're upset. Like, okay, it's okay to cry. Like, okay, I'd be upset about that too. Totally. Yeah. And then I try to offer them something to help them.
Right.
But if you just try to
told a different child, don't cry, stop crying.
Stop crying.
Why are you crying. It's okay, you're fine. And it's like, but I'm not fine. And I am crying and I have a reason. And just because me crying makes you feel uncomfortable doesn't mean that you should tell me to stop crying. And
now that part of them is frozen. It's frozen until they deal with it.
That, and so like when I'm at the park and I hear a mom tell a child to stop crying, it just hurts my soul.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. I love it because like I really try to simplify it. Like I tell people I'm going to take kind of like all these years of what I learned and simplify it, right? Like, so instead of like saying we're going to raise your consciousness, I'm like, we're just going to make you happier. Like, instead of saying like, oh, well, it's your 3-year-old self that, had this event happen and that's, she doesn't feel worthy and she's showing up in you. All of that is so true. And early in my kind of coaching, I would try to go like so deep with everyone, but I think people are just like, can we fix this or can't we? And it's like, and so sometimes like with time, we like go really deep, and some people want to know everything, and some people are just like, so can you clear it? Can you like help me? Is there like an answer? Like, how do we release it? But I think it is beautiful to have this like really deep understanding. I too am kind of obsessed with like what is exactly causing this. But I tell people, that my gift is really taking something that's so complex and just simplifying it for people so that they can live a better life, right? And like, I always try to make it as simple as possible so that it's really accessible to the masses, because I do think many people don't do this work because it's so complex, because our brains are so complex, and there's these kind of times in our lives where our brain is really susceptible, and there's all of these things which, yes, I have like gone really deep and wide on, and also I just try to like speak to everyone like a 4th grader, because I think you can just meet so many people from that space. And I think too, for me, one thing that one thing that I probably wish I hadn't done was like just did the work earlier. Like, I was so busy trying to learn everything that I just was learning so I could say all these fancy things and like help people understand it in this beautiful way. And they probably were like, well, girl, why are you still unhappy if you know all this stuff? And then when I really just started to embody it, I got to this point, like, I think my purpose in this lifetime is just to make this work more accessible and just much more easier, and not for it to feel so abstract for people, for the everyday human.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something I agree with. You have to embody it. That's why my whole channel is called Embodying Mystical MAC. It's not called Mystical MAC because it's a journey of my whole life to like become this person who I am, right? And so 100%, there's definitely, in my opinion, your clients are so lucky that you understand the depth of it all. And at the same time, you can put it for them in this kind of neat little box. I guess what I'm saying is like, if you do have someone who's like, but, it's like you have the wealth of knowledge to be like, okay, well, but this, but that, this is it. Now what are you going to do with it?
But I think the resistance comes from I think it's hard sometimes to have awareness, right? So the resistance is coming from this like, oh, like, how do I shift and start to take this radical responsibility, right? And so that is like when you sign up to work with me, it's kind of the first thing I talk about. Like, you have to be really curious. You have to like really be willing to explore, what we're going to talk about, because people are like, no, I don't think that's it. And it's like, well, let's take a step back. Let's be curious. And you have to get to this place of just radical responsibility. Anything in your life that you want to change, you're solely responsible for, right? Like we other everything, right? Like we, like, oh, this is so-and-so's fault and this is so, and that could be true. There are things that have happened to you and only you can change them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we did talk a little bit about how how happiness is an ongoing thing, right? And so the last thing I want to touch on is you have a model. You have your base model, right? So just this last little bit that we're going to touch on, like your personal work that you do. So just let us know, what is your base model? How do you use it? How did you develop it?
Yes. So I developed it through a lifetime of work, but I've really tried, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, to distill it. And so I call it base because I think it's foundational to living the life that you want, right? And so, and you can use it in any area of your life that you're looking to work on, and it's going to help. And so the first step of base is beliefs. So what are the beliefs that you have? how did you come to believe them? Where are they limiting you in nature? And how do we kind of like reframe those beliefs? And then the A is alignment. So I talked about that earlier, right? Like if where you're trying to go is here, but the dense emotions you're feeling are down here, like how do we like help you get on the same frequency of that which you're looking to achieve? The S, I think, is one of the most important. It's really self-awareness, right? So how do you get to the point of saying like, oh, these are things that I continue to invite into my life, and this is why that showed up. This is why that showed up. Just having this really beautiful awareness of kind of what you are circling around. And then the E is about emotional resistance. This is the biggest one, right? So this kind of looks over those first 7 years of your life when almost your entire life is shaped, and we really evaluate like what happened to you, right? Like nothing that was your fault, but there are things that happen. What is the origin that is causing this to continue to show up in your life? And if we get back to that origin and we do this really beautiful healing work that allows you to keep the memory of whatever occurred and release that dense emotional resistance that's causing you to go back to it, right? And so, as I mentioned, emotions are just so powerful. And so what we see is that we just keep getting pulled back until we learn the lesson. And once we learn the lesson, once we clear that dense emotion, then we're going to really be able to fly in this beautiful way. And so I take people through these 4 steps. Some of it is through, conversations and kind of like helping people to like look at why things are showing up for them in the way that they are. And then some of it is through kind of energy work, and I have a strong intuitive ability to really see people and meet them where they are.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
I love that. The fact that you called it base is awesome. I really do feel that you've kind of very much narrowed it down. That is what makes a life, regardless of what kind of life it is, right? That's what makes a life. If you lack self-awareness, that also makes a life, right? And everything else gets affected. Yeah, that's really, really cool. Everything you're about is super cool. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the audience? I know you have a couple of courses coming up. We'll go ahead and link those in the description below, both on the podcast as well as in the YouTube channel. So check those out, people. If you want to just let us know a little bit. Anything else you'd like to let us know?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit about 2 things. One, on the 1st and 15th of every month, I do a free journal entry, I call them, which is just like my kind of blog where I talk about an issue like self-worth or fear or safety, and it helps people kind of think about their own lives, and it gives, a couple tips that you can implement on your own. So I'd love for people to sign up for that, for those journal entries. And then I am launching a 4-week online course next month, depending on when this will air. And so would absolutely love for people to sign up for it. It's $497, and it takes people through the base method on their own. I just wanted to find like this really accessible way for people to start to understand. So every day you'll get a lesson, you'll get action steps, and it's going to help you do this really beautiful assessment of your life. And if you think that being happier will improve your life, which it will, I think the course would be amazing for you. Yeah.
That's awesome. So it's kind of like it takes you out of the equation, and it gives what you give to people and allow them to, the self-starters, the people that are probably more like us that are like, let me get into this on my own. Gives them that chance. Exactly
right. Cool. Yeah. And you can find all of that, like you said, in the show notes. If you sign up early, I do 1 free coaching session with people that sign up in advance. Yes.
That's a great pre-order bonus.
Yeah. Right?
I'm a gamer, so whenever you pre-order games, typically they give you stuff for the game. So it's like, that's cool. I love that. That's awesome, Brandi. Well, it was such a pleasure to talk to you. Your work sounds like it's so, not even sounds like, I just know it's so incredibly important. The second I read everything, I was like, okay, I don't know this woman, I don't know, but like this feels good. So like, I think this is important, and just talking to you has been such a pleasure, and I've gotten a lot of it. A lot from it. I really hope that our viewers and listeners have also gotten a lot from it. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and follow you on your Instagram. I was checking you out yesterday. I was like, I'm going to follow her, but I feel like I should follow her after we have a conversation.
You're so sweet. And I would just like to say thank you. Thank you so much for doing this work. Thank you so much for showing up for people in this amazing way. And of course, thank you for having me today to have this conversation. I also gleaned a lot from you. So it's always good to be in community with like-minded humans that can help us continue to evolve. So I appreciate you and your time today. And thanks to all the listeners and viewers for being here with us.
Yes, of course. If you guys have any questions or anything, just please comment them below. If this podcast episode, if you're listening on the podcast, thank you. If it impacted you in some beautiful, lovely way, we'd really appreciate a review. And go check out Brandi's socials, because she's getting it on over there, and she's going to get stuff up on her YouTube. I just know it. And her first video looks so cool. So yeah, she's doing Q&As. She's obviously really cool. So you guys should really just check her out and learn how to create the base for a better life.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you, Brandi. I'd love to keep in touch with you. Maybe do another interview in like 6 months to a year's time. Just see how your business is going, everything is going. If you're up for that.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being so gracious, and I really am so happy that I got to meet you. You're a beautiful spirit.
Oh, thank you.
And raise your prices 20%. Okay.
I will do that. Okay. Everybody, you heard that. My tarot readings are going up 20%. If you like to book one of those, the deal is in the description below. You know what to do. But thank you so much for being here, everybody. This is what we got for you. Some ways to support the channel. You can, of course, like, subscribe, and please click the bell button, because I post regularly, but I don't post on a schedule. And you could, right? Just not me. And if you could follow the podcast, that would also be super helpful. If you want to financially support this whole operation, you can donate to my Venmo. That is the most direct way possible while I don't have a Patreon and while my YouTube channel isn't my full-time job. But you could also book one of my tarot readings by emailing me, and you can also go ahead and check out my affiliates below. So thank you. Brandi's links will also be down below. Please do check her out, and stay mystical, stay grounded. We'll catch you next time. Thank you, Brandi.
Bye.
Bye.